Good afternoon and welcome to State Senator Jen Day, legislative candidate from District 49. Thank you, Senator Day, for joining us for our virtual legislative candidate meetings. My name is Gina Ragland, and joining me today is Volunteer State President Susan DeCamp and Advocacy Lead Volunteers Joyce Beck and Bob Lassen. Senator Day, we appreciate your taking the time to meet and discuss issues of importance to the 50-plus voter and their families in Nebraska. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be shared with AARP members across your district prior to the election. So Senator Day, to start us off, would you mind taking about 5 minutes and give us a little bit of background about yourself and your campaign? And then once you've completed your opening, we'll move into the questions. So thanks for joining us, Senator, and it's back to you.
Yes, of course. Happy to be here. So my name is Jen Day, and I currently represent Legislative District 49 in AARP County. I ran originally for this district in 2020, and I am currently running for re-election. I got my start in politics, sort of in politics through advocacy many, many years ago. And I was on a board with a professor from UNO and became really interested just in policy, public policy and government. And I made the decision, I think I was 34 or 35 when I decided to go back to college to get a BS in political science, just because it was something I was interested in. I was thinking maybe I would, work on campaigns or get involved in public policy that way. But that's kind of a difficult thing to do here in Nebraska. We don't have a really great, robust network of campaign staff. And I knew that, I was just very interested in how public policy affects every aspect of people's lives. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's one of the most powerful things that so many people don't realize truly impacts every single thing that we do. And so I wanted to get more involved with that and do something that was maybe more impactful to genuinely help people live better lives. And I lived in this district for about 10 years and prior to the 2020 election. And I was kind of unhappy with the representation that we had in the district in terms of the responsiveness or lack of responsiveness that I would get personally when I would email or make phone calls. I was really concerned about some specific policies that would affect my family, and had gone and testified at the state capitol. And, we were talking about what are we going to do about this race in 2020? We need to find somebody to run. I never saw myself as a candidate. It was not something that I ever thought I would be interested in. It's way out of my comfort zone, in terms of like knocking doors and talking to people and things like that. It was very much out of my comfort zone. But when it came to the fact that we didn't have anybody to run against the young man who was an appointee in this district, I was like, well, I guess I'll go for it. And we, at the very least, I'm giving people a choice. That's what representative democracy should, to function properly, people should have at least a choice on the ballot. Everybody was like, there's no way you can win in this district. So I just wanted to force the other candidate to have real honest conversations about policy and maybe try to represent some of the people like myself who feel like we haven't had great representation down here. And then, so on and so forth, I won in 2020. I'm a mom of two young boys that are now 12 and 16 years old. My husband works for the Union for Contemporary Art. He's their development director. He's also my campaign manager. He was in 2020. He is also my campaign manager this time around. We owned a business for about 10 years before I got elected. We owned a gym. I coached all of our barbell classes. I competed in Olympic weightlifting and coached all of our Olympic weightlifters and power lifters and that kind of stuff in the gym. And I have found this passion for public policy through becoming an elected official and really accomplishing some of the things that I'm the most proud of in my life. I would tell you that it's been a tough 4 years to be in the legislature. Things have been pretty rough down there. lots of controversial policies that have been on the floor that we've had to deal with, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And when it came to the opportunity to run for reelection, I couldn't say no, because like I said, understanding the impact of public policy on people's lives and the feeling that you get when you're able to do something that you know is genuinely going to help people, is such an incredible privilege. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to run for reelection here in 2024.
Thank you, Senator Day. I appreciate that. And again, appreciate your leadership in the legislature and all that you've done in the past 4 years. So thank you for that. We'll go ahead and move right into our question section next. We provided you with a set of 3 questions pertaining to the 50 plus in Nebraska. These are issues you're probably familiar with because we've been working on them in the legislature, but these are issues we're hearing from our own membership when we are surveying them and talking to them. And so again, that's why we're working on them. We're looking to have you allot about 5 minutes for each question, just for the essence of time. Again, they're jam-packed, and so there's lots of information and probably lots to answer. So do your best. And our first question comes from Joyce Beck on health, caregiving, and home and community-based care. So go ahead, Joyce.
Well, Senator Day, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're a busy person. I appreciate any time that you can give us. And I have to make a confession to you in that I am a gym rat. And I love to lift weights. And so once I got started, I kind of got addicted to it, actually. So anyway, I just want to let you know we had that in common.
Love it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. 84% of Nebraskans over 45 say that staying in their homes as they get older is extremely important to them. Home and community-based services and area agencies on aging become important assets to caregivers as they care for loved ones. Home care not only meets the needs of their loved ones, but it also provides relief to an already strained long-term care industry. So I have 2 questions for you, Senator Day. What would you do to protect and/or expand the home and community-based programs, particularly recruitment and retention of a sufficient workforce and adequate funding for the programs and services that older Nebraskans and their families rely on? And the second question is, what would you do to support the 179,000 unpaid family caregivers in Nebraska?
Yes, thank you, Joyce. And I love hearing from another fellow gym rat. Always, especially when I meet women who love to lift weights. That's always the plan, is getting more women involved. But
it's addicting.
It is addicting, and it's good for you, right? Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this is it's an interesting question because my family travels a lot, I guess I will say. And I will tell you that the United States is kind of unique in terms of how we handle seniors and people who are aging, in that they often live alone in the United States. And we have to support the autonomy of our seniors by making sure that we can provide these types of services, like you were mentioning, home-based care. I will tell you that I've served on the Health and Human Services Committee for 4 years, and this is one of the issues that we have discussed multiple times. I will say that from my perspective, Nebraska, our support as a state for funding for these types of programs, I will describe it as abysmal. And in terms of ways to solve the problem, number one, we have to work on, as you said, unpaid workers, paid family medical leave, and some of the other ways that we can address the issue from a state perspective. And making sure that those that are providing these services have the means to do so, because it benefits both parties, right? And I will, so it's hard when you have experience in the legislature when it comes to the budget, right? I would say that one of the main issues that we have in being able to afford to fund programs like this is how we handle the budget generally. We are currently cutting large chunks from Health and Human Services that would potentially provide funding for programs like this. And going forward, again, with the issues that we're having with community-based care, nursing care, and things like that, the problem, and we have an aging population that is going to grow vastly in the next, decade, 20 years. The problem is only going to get worse. And so I think the state, from my perspective, has to take very seriously the issues that we have with addressing home-based care, nursing care, those types of things in terms of providing more substantial funding. And that will come down to revenue sources for the state. That will come down to how we prioritize specific things in the budget. And, just generally how we address issues with keeping people in their homes, which also goes into a little bit in terms of property taxes as well. So it's hard because there's not one simple solution. The obvious solution is we have to provide more funding as a state for these types of programs. We need to implement policies where we can make sure that these community-based providers, home care providers, family members who are coming in to take care of their aging family members can be paid for their time, or at the very least can afford to take some of that time away from work to be able to take care of a family member. That, in terms of funding, is a very complicated issue. But I will tell you that I am all in favor of making sure that we are at the very least maintaining the current appropriations in the state budget under the Department of Health and Human Services and expanding in the upcoming years to make sure that we are appropriately addressing what is really becoming a crisis in the state of Nebraska in terms of elderly care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you for your leadership on the HHS committee. I know it's a difficult committee and there's difficult issues that come in and out of there, as well as to the floor. I also personally want to take this opportunity to thank you publicly for your co-sponsorship of the caregiver tax credit, LB 937 last session. I know you co-signed on to that very early, and again, it's a small step and it's not going to solve all the problems, but it is another way to support family caregivers that are unpaid. So thank you for your leadership and supporting caregivers, Jen. We appreciate that. So our second question moves us into consumer fraud, exploitation, and protections. And Susan DeCamp will take that one. So go ahead, Susan.
Hello, Senator Day. It's great to have you with us today.
Hi,
and I know you're probably aware that I am a constituent of yours. Yes. I live in District 49. And I also want to take this time to thank you for your great leadership and for all your support for all Nebraskans as well as the people in your district. So,
yes, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the fraud topic. Scammers are increasingly targeting older adults with scams such as wire transfers, gift card scams, like I'm sure you've heard of the grandparent scam, and schemes now are popping up involving real property. So nationwide, the average victim of elder fraud lost nearly $34,000 due to these crimes in 2023. And in Nebraska, the FTC showed that there were 4,643 fraud reports made in 2023. Nearly 9 in 10 consumers agree that lawmakers need to do more to protect consumers from fraud and scams. So with that in mind, our question for you, and it's a lengthy question. Consumers lose billions of dollars each year to online, financial, property, and other types of fraud. What will you do to address and ensure that Nebraskans are protected against fraud and deceptive business practices and provide opportunities for redress to victims of fraud? Would you support enacting laws to require merchants to sell gift cards, to post notices about fraud? Would you support enactment of a consumer fraud restitution fund? And would you support implementation of preventative measures to assist in combating owner and seller housing impersonation fraud?
Yes, thank you, Susan. It's nice to see you. I will tell you again first, yes, I would support all of those things. I have had incidences in my family of this specific type of thing happening. And continuing, not just me personally, I have in my own family, but also with my parents. And even the gift card scam has happened within my family as well. I support all of those things. I think that I will tell you one of the dangerous things that I'm hearing in the current election cycle from a few different candidates is, we continue to hear this discussion about cutting red tape and eliminating regulations. And there is some merit to that, but sometimes that looks like when we're talking about this type of requiring shop owners to post notices and those types of things, sometimes it applies to those things as well, right? And so I think that this is the issue that we often run into is we will sometimes favor the quote unquote cutting red tape or removing regulations over protecting the general public. And I think you have to find a balance between those two, because yes, there are some unnecessary regulations. We can streamline things for people. However, again, with the growing aging population being very vulnerable, in particular when we're talking about the internet and online scams, they're maybe just not quite as literate when it comes to using the internet, having smartphones and what that looks like. Again, growing up in a generation where, even when I was in high school, we didn't have smartphones and that kind of stuff. So I had a pager when I was in high school, and that was high tech at the time. But again, having family that's gone through this, you see just how easily people can be duped into being scammed out of thousands and thousands of dollars, if not more. And we have to be doing something to address it, again, because of the very vulnerable aging population that we have and the deceptive nature, the very high skill, high tech deceptive nature of these scams that are happening. So yes, any and all of that I support completely, and would love to introduce a bill to work on something like that as well.
Wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We will remember that for sure.
Please.
And thank you for your insightful thoughts on this issue. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really, really scary, especially, I guess I'll tell you, it happened to myself and my husband a few years ago when we were small business owners. And, my husband is, at the time was, mid-30s. And we're smart people, business owners. And, again, just the issue of smartphones and all of this wild AI stuff that's happening. The skill that some of these scammers have is incredible. And we are very literate when it comes to the internet. My kids are very literate. So for us to be vulnerable to that type of thing, let alone, again, like I mentioned, my parents who didn't grow up with these types of things, it's hard to understand, in terms of information literacy and the requests that you're getting. It's very high tech. You can get a phone call now with the caller ID looking like it's coming from OPPD or something like that, and they'll request information from you, and you give it to them not knowing that it's a scam phone call. So anyways, yes, I'm happy to support any and all of the above, and I definitely think that we have to be doing something very quickly to address it.
Great.
Good.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Senator Day. We'll definitely be following up. We do have some ideas in mind of some other pieces of legislation to move this forward, in addition to what we've done in the past. So thank you again for that. Our last question, and this will probably be your favorite because I know there's one issue within that Bob's going to talk about called homestead exemption that is very near and dear to your heart, which also includes our livable community concept of helping people stay in their homes and communities. So without stealing your thunder, Bob, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for being here today. AARP's main goal is to allow people to age in place and stay in the lowest level of care and cost as long as they can. To that end, there's a couple things that I'd like to talk to you today about, and one of them is zoning obstacles that we get into, and the other one is the property tax. So the zoning obstacles allow just single-family residential homes in a lot of cities, okay? In these communities, zoning does not include other housing types, such as accessory dwelling units, the ADUs, manufactured homes, intergenerational duplexes, or apartment buildings that may be better options for elderly. The second part is dealing with property tax, and this again is most burdensome for many people, but it's particularly bad for low incomes and older residents who are on fixed incomes. So, and then we'll talk a little bit about homestead exemptions too. Now, the questions, Nebraskans over 65 are the fastest growing segment of our population, and research shows that most want to remain in their homes and communities as they age. As housing costs continue to increase, older adults are unable to find housing to meet their needs when seeking to downsize, and thus are being pushed out of communities and the homes that they have lived in for generations. What will you do to support, incentivize, and ensure the creation of affordable and diverse housing options, such as accessory dwelling units, intergenerational housing, or manufactured housing units, or townhomes? The second question is, how will you fight to ensure that the homestead exemption program is maintained and protected to ensure that older Nebraskans that qualify continue to have access to the tax relief program that allows them to age in place?
Yes, one of my favorite topics. Thank you, Bob. It's interesting that you mentioned the zoning restrictions. We discussed this a little bit. I also serve on urban affairs, and we discussed this a little bit this last session, I believe, or maybe the session before. And I'll refer back to what I mentioned previously about traveling. My mom's family is originally from Sicily, and in Sicily, elderly family members tend to stay with the younger family members. They live with them, they live on the property, they sort of live and they take care of each other that way. We don't have as much of that culturally in the United States. And so, but again, making sure that we are trying to provide those types of benefits through things like the accessory dwelling units, and maybe figuring out how we can change some of those zoning restrictions to allow for a family member to live on the property with some of the younger family members is an incredibly beneficial thing for all family members involved. And we've also discussed some of the intergenerational housing. I know Senator Wishart had a bill that she was working on that I believe we passed to, and I think it was, I don't think it was housing. I pardon me, but I don't remember the details of it. But it had
care.
Yes, it was childcare. That's right. It was
Mm-hmm.
childcare where they're bringing some seniors together with the kids in the childcare and allowing them to interact with each other, because again, the statistical research benefits for both parties are very, very strong. But I think this is one of the first businesses of its type in Nebraska. So I see this as an opportunity in both areas to continue to grow these types of living and interaction units, the intergenerational living facilities. And again, we know the research benefits for the young people, for the aging population. And I absolutely love the idea of the accessory dwelling units and trying to keep family close to each other. If not family, then having a living quarters on the property in the area where people can interact regularly and provide care as needed, as you said, so people can stay in their homes with the lowest amount of care that's necessary. I know that, and I can't remember the specifics on the issues with the zoning, but I believe as it currently stands, we cannot have those accessory dwelling units on the property, if I'm correct, I believe. Is that correct?
In most places, that's true, yes.
Yeah. And so I think we had talked about maybe changing some of those restrictions to allow for that. Again, as we keep saying, as the largest swath of the population continues to age, this is going to become more and more necessary. And when you see the benefits of keeping family together, having people close to each other, the ease of the care that can be provided, it's kind of again, and the benefit to the state in terms of the lower costs for care in the long run, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? So in terms of property taxes, so being in Sarpy County, this is oh my goodness, is such a huge issue. And I try to tell people, I'm like, I live in Sarpy County too. So I feel it just as much as everybody else. And you wouldn't believe the numbers of emails and phone calls and messages that I got this year where people's property taxes had gone up, or excuse me, their valuation had gone up 30 to 40% just over the last year. And the increase in property taxes is just out of this world. And there's so many problems with property taxes in Nebraska, right? We have to address the issue, I think, from a larger perspective. Nebraska has an issue with revenue, right? We cannot cut property taxes if we don't have enough revenue to fund essential government services, right? We cannot rely on cutting, $250 million from Department of Health and Human Services to shift that into property tax cuts. We cannot raise sales taxes to provide property tax relief. I think that we have to find new sources of revenue as a state, and I believe that there are options for us out there. And I think that that's one of the first places that we have to start. I love that you brought up homestead exemption, because I went to a meeting over the summer where it was a mayor of one of the local municipalities had said that he had gone to, I believe it was Illinois, and they have a program in Illinois where you can stack homestead exemptions, and we can sort of provide more targeted property tax relief, right? So you can qualify for multiple types of homestead exemptions, and you can stack those. And I loved that. And I think it would be a really great way to provide substantial property tax relief to people. I also think in terms of the homestead exemption program, we have to, I would say, modernize it a little bit in terms of incomes, and some of the limitations that we currently have on the homestead exemption. I believe that some of the income levels are, in order to qualify, are still fairly low. And I think that we need to make some changes in there to allow more people to qualify for the homestead exemption, again, especially as the population ages, so we can provide some of that property tax relief to those who, again, are on a fixed income. And And so, yeah, I don't even remember. I kind of wandered with my answer on this
No,
question.
you did a good job. The you hear all kinds of strange things on the property tax. And of course,
Yeah.
part of that too, the valuations, drives things like insurance. Everybody's insurance is
Yes.
going to go up because the
Yes.
valuations go up, and replacing the house is more expensive supposedly.
And we
And
talked
nothing really has
about,
changed in most cases.
yeah, nothing really has changed. And this is what I have tried to help people understand is that, you know, I wish I could have fixed property taxes in the 4 years that I've been there, but I will say, I'm in the minority in the body, and I wish that I could bring something forward and have it get passed really easily. It's very, very difficult. I've introduced a partially disabled veterans homestead exemption, I think 4 separate times now, because as you probably know, disabled veterans who are 100% disabled qualify for homestead exemption in Nebraska, but anything under 100%, they do not qualify for any relief. And so mine would have gone from, down to 90%, 80%, 70%, you qualify for what we changed to be like a fixed dollar amount from off of property taxes every year. I have introduced that bill 4 separate times. And it's really, really difficult to get stuff done in Nebraska for a bunch of different reasons. You all have worked around the legislature for a long time, so you know how difficult it can be sometimes to get things done. But I also do, with the special session, as difficult as it was, and as much as I disagree with the governor on the way he's handled it and his solutions for property tax relief, he has put it absolutely at the front of people's minds. And we are primed for a really incredible opportunity to do something substantial in the upcoming session if we can just get enough people on the same page. And I think we kind of got there a little bit during special session, where people realize that, like, it's not going to work to just say we're going to raise sales taxes and, we're not going to do this whole tax shift type of thing. And even in my discussions with a few of my more conservative colleagues towards the end of special session, there was definitely an appetite to maybe compromise on some specific things in terms of increasing revenue as a state that they may not have been on board with, because I think everybody has the appetite to do something really substantial for property taxes because we know it's such a huge issue. So it's hard to say. It's been an ongoing problem for a really, really long time. But I think that the appetite is there, and I think that we can definitely get something done without cutting giant chunks from really important places like Department of Health and Human Services, where we're going to be providing some of these other services that we talked about earlier.
That's very encouraging. It really is, because it looked like, and what you read in the newspaper and everything else, it looked like there was no way anybody was going to come together on anything.
And it wasn't going to happen during special session, and we knew that from the beginning. It's just such a short amount of time, and it takes a really, really long time to get people who so ardently disagree with each other to come to, sometimes just to come to the table and come to a compromise agreement. But I feel like we have a really great opportunity in the upcoming session. So I try to remain optimistic about the whole thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to show up at work every day. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Dave. And again, thank you for your leadership on all of these issues, but most importantly, the homestead exemption. Again, it's a really good program. We would be interested in a concept, familiar with that to some level. So I think future conversations. I also want to thank you for your leadership on the Urban Affairs Committee. And just a quick reference, LB 1166 and 1165, Senator Lowe had those in your committee. That did deal with ADUs and the duplexes and did not get out of committee, but I believe Senator Armendariz has an interim study that you're going to be hearing through a hearing on October, the first Friday, I think, in October, but really to look at how we can compromise with municipalities and cities and take away some of that fear of removing local control and trying to find incentives of how we can implement ADUs and different types of housings, especially in our rural communities. So AARP is really focused on housing in that aspect, in development of those types of housing. So we'll be looking forward to being before you at that public hearing and working on that issue moving forward. And also the intergenerational care bill, Senator Wishart's bill. We worked very closely with First Five Nebraska on that, and we were thrilled to see that happen. So hoping there are more pilot projects like that in the future. So in the essence of time, we're coming to the end of our time for the meeting, but I did want to give you just a couple more minutes if you want to have any closing comments or thoughts for your constituents, or if there's further things you want to talk about as far as what your priorities will be in the legislature moving forward. I'll give you a couple minutes back.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. So I mean, I just wanted to say first that you all have been wonderful to work with over the last 4 years. And you know, as someone who has parents in this population, it's really important to me personally to make sure that we're implementing policies that are going to allow people to thrive here in Nebraska, no matter what age they are. And I just really appreciate the guidance that you all have brought me. You've provided so much valuable information for me when it comes to policies, and been willing to dig through and dig into things when maybe I don't quite have all of the answers, and provide me with really great guidance, because it's really, really important to me how my choices impact this population, both personally and professionally. I care deeply about it. So I just appreciate your time today, and always let me know, anybody that's listening, you're always free to email me, ask any questions anytime. If you have any further questions for me, please email myself, my campaign, and I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Senator Day. Thank you again for taking the time with us. We wish you the best with your campaign. We look forward to working with you in the future in the legislature. But most importantly, thank you for meeting with AARP. Have a great.
Of course. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.